In a political climate where practices of evidence are highly contested and the concept of truth itself is called into question, one might ask, how is it possible to undertake investigations that counter the monopoly of state authorities without delegitimizing the idea of scientific knowledge? In their most recent exhibition at the House of World Cultures in Berlin, Forensic Architecture presents its practice of an investigative commons as a potential way to democratize ways of truth production. Especially in cases of human rights violations that are intertwined with colonial power structures, their goal is to decolonize investigation itself. Forensic Architecture is an international and multidisciplinary research team of architects, artists, filmmakers, lawyers, and activists based at Goldsmith University in London. The exhibition also marks the opening of their new office in Berlin, where they want to collaborate with their many partners even more. One of the characteristics of their work is that it moves between different forums and audiences. Their documentations and investigations are shown in art spaces all around the world, as well as in courts and truth commissions. Since 2010, Forensic Architecture has investigated many cases of state violence and human rights violations, ranging from digital violence to environmental racism, from war crimes, police brutality, to the scandalous situation at the European borders or the mistreatment of migrants. Most of their investigations are based on open source material, such as amateur videos circulating on social media, geodata, or surveillance footage. But they also use technically advanced modeling software and a variety of computational methods in order to gather evidence that exposes and counters hegemonic narratives. One powerful example is Forensic Architecture's investigation of police brutality at the Black Lives Matter protests that have swept the US since May 2020 after the killing of George Floyd and other Black Americans.
Forensic Architecture and Bellingcat have verified and located video evidence of this violence and placed it within an interactive platform, totaling over 1,000 incidents from 43 states. This archive evidences the claims made by dozens of organizations that have publicly denounced the ongoing brutality, including UN experts, who demanded an independent inquiry into systemic racism and state-sponsored racial violence.
The role of aesthetics in their investigations is often passionately debated. Many of their videos build on the persuasive power of computer models, timelines, or infographics, and are accompanied by a professional newsreader voice. On the one hand, one could say that they build on a very traditional aesthetic of evidence that mirrors the rather distanced protocols of legal authorities. At the same time, however, many of their investigations also use more experimental modes that explicitly depart from this dry and rational aesthetic. Triple Chaser is a powerful example of that. It is a project to train computer vision classifiers to detect a specific brand of tear gas canisters, manufactured by the Safariland Group, among the millions of images shared online. Many of those grenades were found after US border agents fired tear gas at civilians in November 2018. The entanglement of art and human rights violations is present here on yet another level. The Safariland Group is owned by Warren B. Kanders, the vice chair of the Board of Trustees of the Whitney Museum of American Art. The investigation is Forensic Architecture's critical response to an invitation to participate in the 2019 Whitney Biennale.
In 2016, Warren B. Kanders gave $2.5 million to the Aspen Music Festival. In thanks, the festival renamed the Sunday concert series in his honor, the inaugural evening of which began with a performance of the 4 Last Songs by Richard Strauss.
Von deinen Armen und Blumen
Now that we've created a synthetic data set, we train the machine learning algorithm to recognize Safariland triple chaser tear gas grenades. These images are sampled from our synthetic training data set.
In the context of our web lab, I would like to ask, how are these aesthetics also connected to a different politics of affect in relation to investigation? In their forthcoming book, Investigative Aesthetics, Matthew Fuller and A.L. Weizmann state that, quote, investigative commons are formed through aesthetic practices. Aestheticizing investigation to them means, first of all, a sharpening of the senses. For instance, the ability to detect details and traces in pixelated images that are easily overlooked. But it also means a sharpening of sensibilities. Fuller and Weizmann write, augmenting one's ability to sense means opening oneself to the experience of pain, as opposed to the numbness of political anesthetics. Their emphasis on aesthetics, on the senses and sensibilities, contradicts the common conception of investigation as seemingly cold protocols of verification. Even though one could critically remark that some of their narrations also replicate this rhetoric in a different way, their work and their practice nonetheless opens up important questions about the affective dimensions of truth production and about its relation to political power dynamics in general.